Welcome everyone to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. This is a fun one for us. This is a recap of this year's Staffing Industry Executive Forum, which was held in Las Vegas. Fun place to visit. Sort of a lousy place for a conference because everybody just scatters to the wind. But
I agree.
conference itself was great. So in addition to me, Brad and Susan from our team were at the event this year, and we're going to do our absolute best in what will probably be a very hurried 60 minutes to get through all the notes we took from the keynote sessions we attended, the breakouts that we were in, and some of our take-homes that we each are bringing out of our time in Las Vegas. All right, so to kick things off, we'll start where every Executive Forum recap webinar starts, with Barry Ason's State of the Staffing Industry presentation. So if you've been to the Executive Forum, you know this is always the first talk. If you've never been, Barry, who is, well, he was the president at SIA, but he's now moved on to I forget his official job title, but more of a senior analyst position, as Ursula has taken over as the president of the organization. But not a big shock that Barry's keynote opened with, it's been a really mixed 12 months since the last time we had an Executive Forum, and it's kind of a strange economy. So as you're all seeing, you see all the data and the economy looks good. Now, I know the inflation numbers literally just went up this week, but it has been easing, yet it's still above the Fed's target of 2%, which means they're not going to do nice things to improve interest rates in the near future. And that means, that puts a constraint on borrowing, which puts a constraint on consumer spending. It puts a constraint on business spending, and that puts a constraint on the staffing industry. Now, the counterbalance to that is unemployment is low. It's at 3.9%, and job growth is very solid. It's sort of this really weird time where there's not a lot of people looking for work, but if you're in the staffing industry, it feels like there's not a lot of people looking to hire compared to where it's been in years past. The demand has remained pretty weak. I was surprised that SIA estimated that 2023, they revised it further down to negative 15%, and that the average 2024 revenue will be down 5% this year. And then looking at the bullhorn indicator of the industry on commercial and professional staffing, down 13%. So it's the first time we've seen in a long time, take out maybe 2020 because of COVID, really this persistent weak demand. If you looked at the economic data and said, where should our industry be based on what's happening in the broader economy, we should have 5.4% growth. So something strange is going on, and Barry at one point literally said, we don't know. Now, we did hear some answers at the conference, which we'll get to later, as to what might be causing this. So what is going on? Is it pandemic aftershocks? Is it the economy is seeing growth in areas that don't use a lot of staffing? I did hear somebody say that a lot of the talent demand is being driven by government spending, things like infrastructure building and defense, that in general don't hire as many temporary workers and contractors as private industry does. So that's one of the reasons you see low unemployment but a weaker staffing market. And another one here is the lower employment churn. People are afraid, so they're less likely to quit, and they're not going on to find new jobs. Less churn means less demand for staffing services. So looking forward, how about this year? What's going to happen? So it was very interesting. Like, there's 5 major trends that are up on the screen, and I don't remember exactly if these were the same major trends from 2023, but I felt like this is the same list. Digital transformation has been going on since probably 2015, 2016. It exploded in 2020. And this year, we're seeing a lot of talk around staffing platforms, and companies we're going to be the Uber of staffing. But we're seeing a lot of growth in those areas, and the pace of growth in platforms is much higher than the broader staffing industry. AI, I think in order to be a presenter at the Executive Forum, you had to, somewhere in your presentation, mention AI. There were 5 or 6 talks solely focused on AI, and those that were not solely focused on AI found some way to include it. But this is pretty scary, exciting, take your pick. 39% of tasks are expected to be replaced by AI within 3 years. I saw Elon, I think it was just yesterday or Tuesday, he said that the AGI, which is the general intelligence, essentially when the machines get smarter than a human, was forecasted to be about 5 years off, but Elon said it's going to happen next year. And his forecast says is within 5 years, AI will have the intelligence of the entire human species. A little scary. Don't know what that's going to mean for the staffing industry, for all of our jobs, but it was crystal clear from the Executive Forum. We absolutely have to get fully on board with how AI can be and will be used in our businesses. Continuing trend, labor demand greater than supply, that's not going away. So good news for staffing is really twofold. Number one, you've got a structural shortage of talent in almost all industries. And then you also have a trend of businesses wanting to increase the percentage of their workforce that is contingent. I think going from 23 to 28%, which is a very significant increase in the use of temporary and contract workers. Then on the employee side, there's a lot more demand to be in flexible jobs. It's a bit of a conflict with what's going on in the economy, where more businesses are saying, get back in the office. We don't want you working remotely, and even hybrid's not so great. But the workers, they want those contract jobs, the gig jobs that allow them to have flexibility of their schedule, flexibility on location, more control. So for staffing companies, historically, a tiny percentage of work has been remote. We're going to have to look to partner with our clients, like how do we embrace more remote workers and figuring out new ways to get work delivered. And the last major trend, not a surprise here, turbulence and uncertainty. We've got that little old political thing going on in the US called presidential election. That should be fun this year. There's been major legal battles in Illinois, New Jersey, California that I know the industry has been doing a good job in pushing back, but a lot of fear over what that's going to mean and how far it will spread. And then geopolitics. We still have 2 wars raging on in Israel and in Ukraine, and that has an impact on global supply chains, that has an impact on the global economy, and it trickles back to the United States. So all of these things will impact demand for your services this year, and you need to be aware of how it's impacting your clients. And what does it mean? According to SIA, the industry is going to be basically flat in 2024. Good news is the first half that we're already more than halfway through is the worst half. So you're through the worst of it. We should see improvement in the third and fourth quarters. The only sort of bad part is for our friends in healthcare and particularly travel staffing, travel nursing, not as much locums, but travel therapists, travel allied, still down another 11% this year, and then 2% more in 2025. So for a lot of the travel companies, it's going to be about how do we work with our clients to focus on helping them to control costs. How about beyond 2024? What's the future going to look like? I liked Barry's statement. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So look around at how different companies are growing and companies are shrinking. You've seen companies, the big companies, putting in platforms having massive amounts of growth, but most of the industry is not really being driven by platforms yet. You've seen healthcare go up and down in different places. You've seen the rise of remote workers going up and down in different places. So watch the global mega trends, watch what the big companies are doing. That's why I love the Executive Forum, is you get to see what the biggest players are doing and learn to find where are the places we can adapt, where are the niches we can own. Barry's view, that's what he wants to see. He wants to see the staffing industry have more impact and visibility. We need to show people how we can help them manage uncertainty, help them manage the changes in imbalances in the economy. He wants to see our industry be more valued by employers as being a strategic partner and by workers as providing flexibility and really being their career partner. Wants to see us be more strategic, not just filling open job orders, but actually thinking about helping companies better manage their business challenges, how work gets delivered, how deadlines are met, how costs are controlled, how productivity is improved. And that the industry is going to become even more tech-driven while remaining human-centered. It won't get away from being a relationship-driven industry, but technology is going to eliminate the low-value transactions people spend their time doing, and the companies that embrace that technology sooner will have a distinct advantage. So how to be more strategic. There's a whole list of bullets on here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but think about what are other services related to people, related to HR management, related to workforce management that your clients need that you are ideally positioned to offer by expanding outside of traditional staffing services. All right, I think that's the keynote number one. Brad, let's move on to our next keynote.
Thanks so much, David. This was a great panel of some heavy hitters in the staffing industry, and it represented various verticals within the industry. So we had key leaders from AirSwift, from TrueBlue, Allegis Global Solutions, Adecco, and CHG Healthcare. And the big question, which David alluded to earlier, is why staffing weak when the GDP is strong? There's such good economic indicators. And I came into this saying, boy, I've never seen a market like this where it's so hard to find talent, so difficult to get a job order. Usually it's one or the other. So I was looking for answers myself. And this panel kind of answered that. And they said that staffing is weak right now because most of the GDP growth has been on the government side. Government spending has been driving that growth. Businesses aren't doing the spending. They're waiting on interest rates. They're nervous, they're skeptical, and they're waiting for a change in that market. And then on top of that, which David mentioned earlier, we have seen the biggest reset ever in travel healthcare. And it's come at the cost of the staffing industry. It's been a big challenge there. So then we transitioned into what areas are growing, where is their potential? And first and foremost, and this was shared by Janet from AirSwift and backed up by Taryn from TrueBlue, the energy sector and renewables is exploding. And part of the reason for this is that AI, a basic AI search can take 10 times the energy of a basic Google search. And they predicted that by 2030, 20% of energy usage is going to go to AI data centers. You've got big tech players that are investing in energy executives. So it's a full new seat at the executive table, and departments that are being built out to help manage energy and resources throughout large organizations. And then Amazon just last month in March bought a nuclear powered data center. So large organizations are investing in this space. They're seeing big growth in renewables and even specifically in solar. I believe that it was Janet from AirSwift that mentioned they're installing a lot of solar fields in rural areas, and that's been a big growth area for them, and they don't see a sign of slowdown. And then, of course, the government and defense spending has increased. David alluded to this earlier. With wars going on around the world, we've seen some growth there. Other panelists outlined growth in statement of work and the consulting side. So while the typical contract or temp side has been a little bit weak, the statement of work and consulting side has been very strong. And they've seen growth in the US and abroad. And then, much to the chagrin of most attendees there, Steve from Allegis mentioned that the MSP and VMS side of things are now flowing from the large organizations down into the medium-sized businesses. They're seeing more medium-sized businesses embrace MSP, VMS. And then Leslie from CHG mentioned that they're starting to see the travel healthcare side stabilize a little bit. But it's, as David alluded to earlier, the data shows that that's probably still going to decline this year and a little bit into next. But on the flip side, they are seeing double-digit growth on the physician side. So I still think there's opportunity there, but some organizations that have had a sole focus in travel may have to shift into the physician side. And then the last item I want to share is an outlook or a story that Steve Schumacher from Allegis Global Solutions shared. And I thought this was really enlightening and encouraging. So Steve mentioned that coming into Staffing Industry Analysts Executive Forum last year, he was really nervous because he had already been seeing the signs of slowdown. He had already been seeing enterprise clients beginning to pull back. He had been seeing new orders drop. And when he got to the executive forum, what he heard was the opposite from people. They were still seeing growth. They were still seeing orders coming in, and it made him nervous. And he thought, boy, am I alone in this? Fast forward to now, and I think Steve was an early indicator of what was coming. We were going to see a slowdown, but Allegis is the largest US staffing company, a big player in MSP and VMS, and we saw that he saw that decline ahead of the rest of the industry. What was encouraging to me, though, is Steve said his outlook was the opposite coming into Executive Forum this time. He's seeing growth. He's seeing enterprise clients begin to come back and get back to levels that they were at, seeing new interest. So I hope that he is correct, and I hope he's an early indicator that growth is coming. And if that's the case, then we all need to prepare. We all need to do the right things to double down on our efforts so that we can gain market share and growth as that begins to come back. David, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thanks, Brad. Next keynote was Paul, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but Zikopoulos, who is, I believe he's with IBM, and it was a fun keynote. Not only was he a great speaker, but he's super nerdy and geeky. Like, he kept talking about, well, I was waiting for this session, and I went out and I wrote this AI program for myself to do a little data analysis to put up on the screen. It's like, all right, this is really cool. I need to be like you. But he was showing about, I hope we got a little oddity in the building, but AI and what's happening, where it's going, how we need to adapt. And his message, as you can see the first bullet here showing, we really are at the point where we either adapt to how we bring AI into our operations, or we will not be in business. There is not going to be a place for a company that is not AI enabled to compete with one that is. And then he talked about a couple of ways that companies can adapt to AI. And I really like this thought process. And maybe he'd spent too much time on Tinder, but he's like, it's the swipe left, swipe right, or shift left, shift right. So one way you're going to use AI is we're going to invest in AI applications to save money, and it's going to be AI and automation. What manual tasks can we eliminate? What repetitive tasks can we teach an AI to do that are impeding our ability for humans to focus on the things they do best that are high value? So this is actually the easiest place to put AI in. Is you look at all of your processes, you map them out, and you say, what things are we doing over and over again? And what things are we doing that do the least value adding to the deliverable, the placement we're making for the client? And then the shift right is, well, how do we take the technology and use it to invent new business models? And staffing platforms are one example of this, but what new business models could come out of AI? There were examples we saw at the Executive Forum of people creating AI assistants. And when I say AI assistants, I mean, we saw one that's a cold calling assistant. The AI makes cold calls. It's done there was one for recruiting, there was one for selling. So now you can have a tireless worker that's making calls. Oh, and the interesting part about it is the AI makes better calls, higher quality than the entry-level human in a sales or recruiting role. Changes the business model when your humans in the workforce are now only the higher level people. You don't need to have that because you can automate, and you can use technology to change the service delivery completely. So a couple of ways to use AI. The one you see is the starting point is you get the off-the-shelf software, and AI is baked into the software. That allows you to be more efficient. So for example, if you're using an ATS, almost all the ATSs are coming out with AI-enabled features. But that doesn't give you a competitive advantage over everybody else using that software. It gives you a competitive disadvantage if you don't have the software. But now a minimum cost of entry is to have an AI-enabled ATS. Then the next thing is you do API calls to a generative AI service. Okay, then what does that mean? Well, that means essentially we're going to figure out how to create our proprietary ways of prompting. either because we're creating our own GPTs or we're using APIs to integrate with the Gen AI services. But essentially, our unique business models get built into prompting we do that allows us to do things better and faster than our competitors. And that gives us a temporary advantage till the competitors figure out their own versions of the prompts, or till the AI learns how we do prompting. And prompting is not even a thing anymore because the AI does it itself. And then the best source of competitive advantage from AI is you build your own models based on your data. So you look at what made clients successful in their hiring, what things went into the hiring process, what traits did the candidates have, what experience. And you essentially, you have the AI take your input data and your output data and build a model of what would make hiring better, build a model of what makes a higher performing recruiter. And what's interesting is it used to be like a year ago, that AIs needed tons and tons of data to do training. But now, I believe Paul mentioned, they can do training on as little as 20 pieces of data to start to figure out trends. And your proprietary models can become your own AI. And that's a real competitive advantage because nobody else has your data. That's also why you see the big tech companies doubling down on locking down data, because they realize the knowledge of the data is their best source of real advantage. That's also kind of bad news for the staffing industry as companies like LinkedIn reduce what you can do through their APIs. So where should you focus your AI time? What kind of projects? Well, first thing is automation. Process map everything you're doing, and where can you use AI to eliminate the need for repetitive human tasks? Then optimization. Start building models for your business based on your data and your results. How do we optimize how we do things? And then the next level was prediction. Can we use our past data to predict the future? So for example, what kinds of candidates are really the most likely to be successful? AI is going to get better at predicting that. The one I like is sales targeting. How do we know when clients are going to need more of our services? Because AI can look at all of the factors that might be evaluated in the economy, in the client's industry, and publicly available information on specific companies to figure out when they're going to have staffing needs, to do more accurate targeting. Also to do that prediction based on certain roles or when people are likely to leave their jobs. You'll see that sort of predictive analysis. Next one is deep learning. This is going back to feeding your data into the system and letting the AI build its own logic. This was science fiction to me. I had a hard time following what Paul was saying, but essentially the idea is the AIs are getting intelligent enough that they can take your data and figure out how you do things and build models for your business based on your own inputs and outputs. And then the next level is autonomous processes. Yes, this is where the Terminator takes over, but essentially it's using AI bots, not physical bots necessarily, but machine bot or computer-based bots that run activities autonomously without human input. So for example, you might be able to do background checks completely autonomously to get really high quality background checks. Or you might be able to do screening of all the candidates you're getting from Indeed so that only the good ones make it to your recruiters, because you could have bots doing that autonomous work behind the scenes. I didn't like this statement. This is the last thing he said, but that AI is going to automate inequality at scale. And what that means is the companies that get it, use it, and adopt it are going to get so far ahead of the companies that don't, that inequality will get worse. And unfortunately, that's not just in businesses. He's talking about too in people. Retraining your workforce to be AI enabled, to learn how to do things, retraining the people that you put to work. There was a lot of talk about upskilling our workers and being a service that staffing companies can provide to become more strategic. Yeah, AI is going to require that you provide a more tech-enabled workforce in all levels of roles. All right, and that was a lousy place to leave that one on, but that's how Paul ended it. Let's move on to some of the breakouts. All right, Brad, I think you are up first.
I am. One of the first breakouts, and as David mentioned earlier, there was AI throughout the entire conference. So during each breakout session, there was one track on AI. And what was nice is it started with a very high level. And this is that high level overview. And then as you'll see as we go on, several of the breakouts got extremely specific into areas in which you can use AI in the business. So at a very high level, they talked about the impact on productivity. And one example shared was a 30% increase in software development productivity by using AI. So it's having a big impact on the IT space. And then they looked at specifically within staffing organizations. And one of the biggest impacts was a 70% improvement in time to place by using a chatbot. They went on to show how AI is being embraced in different size organizations and on both sides of the equation. So let's start off first with staffing process automation on the worker or the temp side. So on the recruiting side of your business, they broke this up into three areas. They looked at small staffing companies that were under 10 million. They looked at medium, which are 11 to 100 million, and then the larger 100 million organizations. And this kind of builds off of the last statement from the keynote. And what they found was the smallest organizations are embracing AI in about 45% of their recruiting or worker temp side processes. When you look at medium-sized businesses, that's 55%. And when you look at the large players, it's 65. So you can see some of that inequality there in that the large organizations are embracing it at a more rapid pace. And we know that staffing is a speed game. So the first one to provide a great quality candidate in that organization is going to get the job order. They're going to make the money. So as a takeaway here, we all need to be thinking about how we can use AI, how we can use process automation to speed up what we do, to get out the inefficiencies in our organization, to make our recruiters more effective, more efficient, and to look at what they're doing that isn't providing value that could be automated, and we need to automate it. And then on the flip side, they looked at the client side. And this one was interesting because they had the same breakdown of small, medium, and large companies, but there wasn't such inequality here. So the small staffing companies are embracing process automation on the sales or the client side at a rate of about 29%. The medium-sized companies were only at 28, and the large organizations were at 32. So I think there's a big opportunity for everyone on this call to think about what they can do on the client side. What can we do to help streamline and automate the sales process? What can we do to streamline and automate the fulfillment process? And we're not that far behind. If we're a small or medium-sized organization, we're not behind the big guys. We have an opportunity to leapfrog them and gain more market share. So I thought that was encouraging. And then a few other tips on how to embrace AI in your organization. One that I really liked was thinking about digital transformation overall and how we leverage AI and technology. And the suggestion was that that should be led by the business strategy side, not the IT side. And I think especially for some of the smaller organizations, we think about AI and we think about tech and we say, well, that's an IT responsibility. But really, we need to take a look at it from the business strategy standpoint and think about how we can leverage technology and AI to move our business forward. That's not to say that you're doing it in isolation and not including the IT department, but it really needs to start with the business outcome that you want and then bring in other departments to figure out how to achieve that. And then the final tip was start with the basics. Look at what you can easily automate. Look at your ATS systems. Look at the current tools available. Begin to automate. Build those into your processes. And then drive to a specific purpose. So again, getting back to that business strategy side of things, start with what you're looking to accomplish and use AI to figure out how to achieve a specific end deliverable, specific end goal. And I'll pass it on to Susan.
All right, thanks, Brad. Well, while Brad was immersing himself in the world of AI, I chose to go to the Building a High-Performance Sales Organization session. The reason I chose this session is I talked to a lot of Healing Marketing clients, and almost all of them are struggling right now with sales and teaching their salespeople how to sell. So in this session, the panel shared some great ideas on how to grow your business by creating a high-performance sales team. And a few items that stuck out to me. One, in 2022 and 2023, salespeople became more transactional. Being on site in front of clients is extremely important right now. I think we all know that. But we need to drive any ability to meet in person. And as leaders, to be a coach right now, you can't be on the sidelines. You have to be on the field with them shoulder to shoulder. So as leaders, we can model the behavior that we want our salespeople to do with their clients. The next one was ask your client how they want to be communicated with. And there was a discussion around how sales used to be more ad hoc phone conversations, and now people set up Zoom meetings, which they stated makes it more informal. I initially thought this was kind of a strange statement, but the more I thought about it, I realized it was actually true. Zoom calls tend to be less formal than a phone call. The next one was manage your salespeople based on experience. And they talked about how you shouldn't manage your salespeople with a big book of business the same as your newer salespeople. A salesperson with a big book of business shouldn't have KPIs like number of calls. What you're really looking for with those experienced salespeople is the outcomes. Next one, evaluate your entire client base. And really at this time, lean into your good clients, particularly during the current economic situation. And then finally, be accountable to your sales strategy that you've created and make sure your salespeople can articulate it. If you may be surprised if you ask your own salespeople to articulate that sales strategy, how few of them are actually able to do that. Okay, so I'm passing it back to David.
Back to me. All right. So then the next session I went to was about companies that had grown really, really quickly. Most of them, I think all of the panelists had sold their businesses, and some of them were starting over again. And first thing they shared was a breakdown of the staffing industry by company revenues. And this one actually surprised me. I've always known there's about 20,000 companies in our business, but I didn't realize that over half of them are less than $1 million in revenues. 10,815 or 56% of the industry are very small staffing companies. Then you go 1 to 5 million, you got 29%, 5 to 10, 7%, 10 to 25, 5%, then 25 to 50, 2%, 50 to 100, 1%, and 100 million plus 1%. Our industry in terms of revenue generation is actually dominated by the bottom of this chart, but the number of staffing companies is monstrously dominated by the small players. And if you're listening today and you're not at the bottom of the chart, you're somewhere in the top 3 or 4 bullets. You know, what this means is you have to think about where you're going to focus, where you can play. And the nice thing is you're not dependent on whatever happens to the economy this year. You're not dependent on whatever happens in your industry this year. You're not dependent on what happens even in your city this year. You're dependent on finding that handful of clients that are the best in the world for you, that you can provide world-class service to, and you can get from 0 to 1 million, 1 million to 5 million just by being more focused on your ideal clients. And don't worry so much about what the people at the other end of the spectrum are doing, except for just be aware of how they're changing how staffing gets delivered. So how did companies grow? And more importantly, why do they fail to grow? Well, this is not really that surprising. It's the ego of the owner. They think they know how to do everything, and they don't allow others to take control, and they don't effectively delegate. They don't focus. All right, I've been guilty of this, chasing the next shiny object. A lot of owners, entrepreneurs in general, like to follow new ideas. And that lack of focus, and these guys said it, you know, in their early years, almost put several of them out of business. So what are the biggest mistakes companies make? This one surprised me a little bit, but I've seen it before. Growing too fast, where your pace of growth kills your cash flow. You can't pay your payables. You can't pay the people because you're growing so fast. You have one client that gets behind or gets delinquent on paying you, and all of a sudden, you're out of business. Not being prepared for a slowdown, building a cash cushion, building efficiency in your business, having strong client relationships. If you are not ready for what's going on in the economy right now, you will feel the slowdown worse than your competitors. You'll have a more difficult time recovering. Also, companies that when times are good, only focus on recruiting and stop selling. You always have to be selling even when there's incredible talent demand and it's like everybody's hiring. We need to be selling aggressively to broaden our client base. And in markets that are slower, we still need to be recruiting so we can be, as Brad said, fastest to fill. Having a lack of clarity. Where are we going? What's our vision of the future? What are the most important priorities for the organization, and communicating those with key leaders in the business? Big one. I've heard this so many times about the staffing industry. We're the cobbler's son. We're bad at recruiting for ourselves. Well, these guys said not only the problems with hiring, but not retaining their great people was a serious detriment to their growth in the early years. So some critical take homes. In the beginning of your business, it's all about revenue. You do whatever you can to put money coming in and fill the bank accounts. Later, as you get more mature, it's about margins and EBITDA, managing to profitability, not just revenue. Everybody to a T said, learn the industry benchmarks, whether it's through SIA or ASA, participate in the industry surveys so you know what you should be spending based on every dollar of gross margin you're earning. And then really focus on developing leaders. The hardest transition for an entrepreneurial company to make is to develop the next layer of leadership. And that's where a lot of companies stop growing or fail. You need people who can build trust, who can coach, and have very high emotional intelligence. So how do you get past 20 million today? I think it's that top 4%. You heard it from one of the keynotes. It's about technology and people. Determining where and how work gets done. What do we automate? What do we offshore? What do we have to keep in-house? Get your hiring right. Have leaders who know what they are doing and are assigned to the right tasks. Build your leadership team. In key positions, I like this one, overhire. Hire people that have built a bigger company than you're looking to build, that are, they said, 2 levels above where you want to get. Because those are the people for whom it's easy to get where you want to go because they've done it. Very often we're growing with the team we started with, and that team's never gotten to that level before. They don't know how. And a key question to wrap this up, what is your #1 growth constraint? And more importantly, how are you dealing with it? A great question for all senior leaders to be asking about their operations. All right, Susan, I think we're back to you.
Thanks, David. So I chose to attend the Extreme Recruiting Strategies, Tips, and Tactics. Try saying that. Some of my key takeaways from this very impressive panel were take a skills first approach. There's a lot of wasted amount of recruiting effort, and a good resume doesn't mean good skills. And recruiters need to learn how to tell the difference in order to succeed. Second one, candidates want consistent and frequent communication. I think that's been happening for quite a while since the pandemic. Provide them updates every 3 days and lean into automation for this. Also, recruiters who don't practice on-demand engagement like a chatbot are going to have a harder time. Good recruiters are staying current with the needs of the candidate, and make sure you're providing the same consistent experience from onboarding through exit interview. Focus and be regimented. Successful recruiters focus their time and are extremely regimented. Their day is planned and they're intentional with everything they do. And finally, staffing is still a people business. Use the tools, embrace the technology, but don't lose sight of the people part of recruiting. And I'll pass it over to Brad.
All right. This next session was led by Mike Jackatote and Marianne McLaughlin from Butler Street. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. A great presentation, great buzz afterwards too. So many people were talking about this presentation. And they rolled out some role-playing AI that was absolutely phenomenal. And to start with, they talked about what your team actually wants. And they said that 67% of employees want AI. Some people are scared of it, but 67% actually want it. But only 29% of them actually get it. So they don't know exactly what they want, and only 29% of people get it. The rest, that's 71%, those are people that don't know where to go or don't have the drive to go learn on their own. So as organizations and as leaders in organizations, it's up to us to really dictate and help them find out where they need to go, what they can do with AI. And Butler Street shared that one of their internal KPIs is for their team members to share at least one example of how they used AI in their role to improve every single week. And I thought that was a great takeaway. So during their meetings, they have to come with a specific item that they used AI for in their role to improve, and they need to share it every single week. So you're learning as a group and you're embracing that, and you're sharing best practices, you're sharing challenges, you're sharing ways that we all can improve and become more efficient with AI. And then Mike went on to share some simple truths. And he said, when they look at their business, the toughest thing to do is get a new customer. Second toughest thing is to keep your current customers, your current clients. So one of the keys and one thing that they preach is that role playing, or as they put it, role practicing, is key, because they're not playing around when they role practice. It's very specific. And where this presentation got really interesting is Mike rolled out a role-playing AI that they built. And he said that they spent 1,000 hours developing different role practice personas. So they looked at the different buyers, looked at different industry types that their clients are selling into, that staffing firms are selling into, and they built out some amazing personas. So they can go through and actually have sales reps practice sales pitches, and the AI actually talks back to them. So in real time, the salesperson is presenting and selling into an AI based on a specific persona. So before they go into an account, they can already go through all of this role playing or all of this role practicing and think through different scenarios, objections, challenges, feedback, develop some key points of differentiation. He also rolled out an AI that they use to call and pitch their lower level services. So it's actually an AI assistant called Amy that they've built out to help answer things. So when you're thinking about how to use AI, it's not just how you provide services, but maybe it's even how you train internal people and get your team up to speed more effectively and efficiently. David, I know that you were also at that presentation. Anything else to add there?
No, I guess one thing is that I went up to Mike afterwards to talk to him about their stuff they had built, and he confided in me. He said, he goes, when they rolled out that role practice internally, their people actually have to go up against the AI every week. And he said, David, it's like, holy crap, nobody could get an appointment with the AI, and I thought they were all going to quit. And he said, but just last week, every single one of them got an appointment with the AI, and they were so proud.
That's terrific. All right, Susan, I'll pass it on to you for the next session.
All right, thanks, Brad. The industrial staffing opportunities and innovation session really focused on what you should be doing during the current industry economic climate. So with this impressive panel of industry veterans, and it was a very impressive panel, who've all been through economic downturns, they were all in agreement that you just need to sell your way through it. Concentrate on relationship building activities right now. Stick to the basics and keep it simple. And I heard this over and over throughout the conference at different sessions. And then they told a story that I found really interesting regarding AI. When ATMs were introduced, everyone was convinced that bank tellers would stop existing. And what actually happened is, while the number of bank tellers were cut in approximately half at each branch, what happened was banks opened up more branches because it was cheaper for them to run each branch. And the number of bank tellers actually increased after ATMs were implemented. Something similar also happened with cash register scanners and e-discovery software for lawsuits. After the advent of this technology, the number of cashiers and paralegals actually increased. And I did Google fact check this with the ATM numbers, and it did happen. And finally, when selecting new technology, ask yourself, does it enable better human interaction? Ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? And several panelists indicated that they had implemented Copilot, and one company implemented a technology for language translation that they also used to teach English as part of their upskilling program, which I thought was a fantastic idea. Okay, over to you again, Brad.
Terrific. This is another AI panel, imagine that. But this one was really focused on the recruiting process. And what I loved about this is there were 4 great panelists, and they were each pressed to provide 2 very specific tactical ideas on how to use AI to improve and drive productivity in your recruiting process. So first up was Lauren B. Jones from Leap Consulting. And she mentioned that 63% of candidates in staffing and recruiting have had a horrible experience during their interview. And it's because interviews are standard and regimented. She suggested using AI to be more well-informed about the position and about the organization that you're recruiting for. So use it to develop deeper, better behavioral and skill-based interview questions that apply specifically to the position. And then building off of what the Butler Street presentation highlighted is that we need to do a better job of improving our internal training. And Lauren shared that tenure now on average is only about 18 months. And what's interesting is that it can take a sales rep well over a year just to get to average. So you don't have much time there. So anything that you can use to shorten that learning curve, use AI and technology to get people on board quicker, faster, more productive is key to driving revenue in your organization. Next up was Jason Leverett from At Work Group, and he shared that internally at Work, they've created a quote unquote information oracle. So they've used an AI bot to, or a large language learning model to load all of their internal processes, their information, their network, their all of their, again, processes, and they allow their internal team to use this to get answers quickly and immediately. Now, they're not uploading this to ChatGPT, and it's an internal tool and it's protected, but it allows them to get answers quickly. We've done the same thing here using technology called Cody AI. It's integrated with our Slack. So if one of our team members has a question about process or how to do something, they can ask the AI and get an answer immediately. And then this is high level, but using email automation and candidate workflows to speed up the process. You need to respond to candidates quickly or else they're going to ghost you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a human recruiter doing that. The chatbots have seen a high level of satisfaction from candidates. They expect an immediate answer. Use that technology to give them one. And then Ashwari from Converse AI shared how they're using AI to interact with candidates within the first 2 hours of applications. Many staffing companies aren't getting back to candidates within 24 hours, let alone 2 hours. Candidates need and want speed, or else they're going to ghost you. And then Ashwari suggested using AI for ATS skill matching. Nothing new, but he shared a very specific case study on this. And they had a forklift operator apply to a position that was 30 miles away for one of their clients. And when that happens, that person might be a great fit for that position, but after 2 or 3 days of driving 60 miles round trip, what are they going to do? Probably going to walk off the assignment, or when one appears closer, they're going to leave and go take that. So instead of going through all of that hassle, use AI to provide a better skill match. So a skilled forklift operator, while they applied to a position 30 miles away, okay, that's going to be an indicator that you need to find a position closer, and they're going to better match that in a closer place. And as we're going through the panel, someone from a large staffing company spoke up, and they thanked Ashwari and said that they're now using Converse AI to fill 1 out of 3 positions. And it's growing. So great tool there. And then finally, Tim Sanders from Upwork mentioned that AI really is about a prediction machine. So use those tools, use those signals to identify intent of people that are looking for a new provider or are looking for a new job opportunity. And then he also encouraged people to use internal GPTs to serve as a personal intern. So much like Jason mentioned earlier, use that to help your team be more successful and use the knowledge that you've already built. And the specific example he said is that they've created an internal GPT to write job descriptions specifically for each different job platform, because Indeed requires different things than Career Builder, than others. So use those tools to be more effective and efficient. And now, David.
All right. Next session I went to was on how to scale your business. Clearly, it was an interest of mine. I didn't realize it until I'm reading all the titles here, and how to grow faster. But this was about building a culture-driven business. And so what you're looking for is to create an organization that brings out the best in the people that you hire. It comes from the top down. Leaders have to have the mindset of being servants and caring about the people on the team. And their job is to support the organization. Don't think of a pyramid, think about it as an inverted pyramid with the leadership at the top, supporting the people on the front line. Excuse me, leadership at the bottom, supporting the people on the front lines are at the top. A big thing that all of the panelists did is communicate with transparency and vulnerability. They weren't afraid to shed lights on their warts and bruises. They weren't afraid to admit their faults. They were open and willing to seek input from other people and to learn and to accept feedback. Our job as leaders is to transfer enthusiasm to people. If people are excited about their job, they're excited about the mission, they're excited about serving your clients, they're going to deliver great service. A quick lesson for those who may struggle with, like, how do we put together our company's core values or values that really resonate? I like this reminder. So when crafting core values, consider what you'd want people to say about your company, either at a cocktail party or in a eulogy. What would you want someone to say about you? Because whatever you'd write down there usually reflects your core values. And the role of the team leader is to care about the growth and success of their team members. And there was a great example from one of the panelists who said in his business, he was asked how he grows a business quickly. And he said, I don't know anything about growing a company. He goes, our whole purpose is to grow our employees in their careers. That's what we train our department heads. That's what we train our team leaders to do. And they have this program called Lunch with the CEO. And the CEO went to lunch with this individual who was a recruiter. And he said, no, what do you like about working here? And the recruiter said, it's pretty amazing. My manager cares about my career more than I do, more than anybody on planet Earth except maybe my mom. And he said this recruiter actually started to cry over lunch. It was so touching that they could work for a company that demonstrated such a high level of caring for the individual. And what the CEO said is his growth came from that's treating people and really focusing on helping them to advance in their careers. Another interesting point was, I forgot who made it on the panel, but that people want to have a best friend at work. We should help facilitate this. And now with more of us working remote and hybrid, it can be harder to find this friendship. People can be more isolated. So we have problems with mental health getting worse in America. So as a company, as leaders, what can we do to facilitate not just professional relationships, but personal relationships being built? And one of the panelists, I really like this. She said that we have a cadence for communication in our company. And she actually planned out, here's what I do every year. Here's what I do every quarter. Here's what I do every month. Here's what I do every week. Here's what I do every day. And she actually plans this all out, and it reminds her when to communicate, how to communicate, and with whom to communicate. Very impressive approach to managing communication. All right, Susan.
All right, thanks, David. So Together We Rise Women in Staffing Leadership. I was really looking forward to attending the session, and I wasn't disappointed. In fact, it exceeded my expectations. This session started out with each of the panelists telling their story about how they ended up in staffing. And like most of us, for all of them, it was accidental. The session focused on how they overcame barriers as they were rising in their careers and how they deal with balancing work and family. Joyce on the panel told a very moving story about a time she had to choose between the request of her largest client during a really serious situation and being with her family for a special event. And she chose family, delegated the situation to her COO, who handled it brilliantly. And as part of the story, she talked about what the long-term repercussions for her family could have been had she chosen the other path. I'm not even kidding when I say she had half the attendees teary-eyed, and admittedly myself included. A few things that were said that really resonated with me were, when faced with the type of situation that Joyce described, apply the 10-minute, 10-hour, 10 years rule, meaning ask yourself, what will the consequences of your actions or decision in 10 years, or 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years? By thinking this way, you get a good framework for the immediate, mid, and long-term view of the impact of your decision. And another one was, don't have a culture that tolerates brilliant jerks. And while the phrase is somewhat humorous, they spotlighted the repercussions to the rest of the team when you have high performers who don't treat people well. And then the session concluded with the panelists being asked the question, What advice do you have for women starting out in their careers, or something you wish your younger self knew? And Joyce said, make sure you are earning and learning. I love that. Both is best, but if neither, leave now. Jessica said, put guilt in its place. It can harbor a lot of your energy, and if you aren't careful, it can delay your conviction and belief of your ability to grow in the organization. Anju said, glass is always half full. Keep your chin up, enjoy, and love what you do. Don't give up, just be out there and enjoy yourself. And Delibert said, learn to respect your time and manage your time. And now I'm going to pass it back to David.
All right. I was really curious about this topic because we're hearing about these staffing platforms. I went to a talk that was put on by a number of the companies that are in the platform business, talking about what they see as being next. I'm sad to say that they didn't share a lot, but I'll give you what I got out of this. It's a $17 billion segment of the industry, so a little under 10% of the industry, but rapidly growing. The value of staffing platforms, it used to be, pick two. Do you want speed? Do you want quality? Do you want cost? The platforms are offering all three. Now, typically they're at 10 to 15% markups versus an average staffing company markup of 60. That stated, a lot of them are 1099 workers, which is how they're at a lower markup, but more and more are adding employer of records services or an employer of record partner so they can offer W-2 talent and directly compete with the staffing industry. Platforms tend to win when they're very niche focused. So the more tightly focused the platform, the more likely you are to be successful. It's interesting. They said MSP VMS tends to win when it's very broadly focused. Now, the question was asked, can platforms and staffing firms work together? And of course, the answer was from the platform people. They can coexist because they offer different value propositions. And my parentheses was, I didn't see them really wanting to coexist. They want to take your lunch. So we got to figure out either how we add platforms, how we compete with them, where our value is. They have a place in the market. They represent 10%, but they're growing. So what can you do that the platforms can't do? We have to figure that out. Now, you're more likely to see crossover as the platforms add managed services and staffing firms add platforms. And we're seeing a lot of this in both directions. I will tell you firsthand experience working with Upwork at one point a few years ago to find an IT contractor for a project. No sooner had we found somebody than that their managed services person was on the line trying to convert us to a traditional staffing model. How can small to mid-sized businesses use talent platforms? Now, this is an interesting use case. They may be your recruiting partner, helping you find talent faster, because if you can get people at a lower cost, then you're going to turn around and place them. That could be an advantage. Now, in other cases, they have really restrictive policies that you couldn't do that, but always check the terms of agreement of the platform before you ever look to recruit through them. But they can also expand your access to talent and reduce the noise from resume overload, because they may be able to provide you access to some of the same candidates, access to more performance reviews, access to data that you might not have when someone sends a resume to apply to a job. And they can be great when you need somebody with very specific expertise and they're not in your database and you may not have the skill to recruit them. You may not have to say no to a client. You may partner with a platform to expand the range of services you can provide to your clients. And then also, if you're under a tight time frame, maybe you partner with a platform. So, hey, I can get you somebody faster, even if it's not directly through us, because what you don't want to lose is the relationship with your client. All right, Susan, we're getting near the end. You're up next.
All right, thanks, David. So developing consulting, outsourcing, and solutions businesses. So why should you pivot? Three main things that came out of this were market opportunity, clients want to partner with a holistic approach, and higher margin business. And then there was a discussion on the downsides and risks, some of which are inability to deliver can hurt your staffing relationship with those clients, scope creep on deliverables, and cannibalizing your core business. And then there was a discussion on, can staffing salespeople do solution selling? And the panel was divided. It's a different mindset and requires subject matter expertise. They recommended training them on how to pick up on leads with their existing relationships. But another panelist said a good consultant can bullshit to buy them time to find out the answer, And while a couple of panelists said they had been successful with training their salespeople on when the right time is to bring the solutions consultant to the conversation. And then overall, solution selling requires strategic planning, investments in technology and talent, and a very deep understanding of client needs and market trends. Then just a few pieces of advice from the panelists. Kate said, you can't run these businesses with the same set of metrics you do staffing. And she advised everyone to start small. Steve said, be able to clearly and cleanly explain what your organization does. Make sure you have that messaging down. Roger says, stay true to your mission. There will be failures, guaranteed. And Rich said, be very clear on what's in it for everyone on the team. All right, back to you, Brad.
All right. And our last session was from Dan Mori, and he really focused on how to drive a healthy staffing sales organization. And he did some high-level staffing math, which I thought was very relevant for everyone that's looking to grow their business. So 3 key metrics that Dan suggested that everyone measure. Number 1 is headcount. That's the person that you put out on assignment, and you need to know the average value of headcount. Next is job order fill percentage and turnover rate. We need to look at how many job orders we have in versus how many are filled each month to get that fill percentage. But then we also need to look at headcount and how much headcount you lose or need to replace in a given month. And finally, the third metric he suggested that we measure is sales performance. So we need to look at our meeting to proposal rate. How many meetings result in a proposal? Then look at our contract conversion rate. How many proposals result in a contract? Then finally, look at our contract to billing client rate. How many of those contracts result in client billed? You need to continually measure these to identify areas in which you can improve. And then Dan, throughout the presentation, shared a free sales tip. He said, when I was running a staffing company, I would use my resume database to search for competitor names. He would call and do a reference check on that candidate, and then send the hiring manager that lead to over to sales. So he would use reference checking and searching the resume database for competitors' names to generate the leads that his sales team would follow up on. And one other reminder that I want to encourage people to do is listen to our podcast. We actually had Dan Mori on a few episodes ago on our Secrets of Staffing Success. He shared some great insight on how to differentiate your firm. And for those that are looking to drive sales success in their organization, great listen. So David, I'll pass it back to you to wrap up with some lessons learned.
All right, let's do a quick rundown of what our take home was. I'll go first. Number 1, I learned how to spell AI, and you should too, but there's no question that the dominance of AI in the talks, even as you saw in our recap here, and we didn't even scratch the surface of all the AI discussions, it's not coming to the staffing industry, it's in the staffing industry, and it's only going to become more and more prevalent. Platforms are on the rise. You got to choose where you're going to compete, how you're going to play, and what you'll do to prevent them from taking your clients and candidates. And there are way more SMB staffing firms out there than I personally thought. So that means find your niche. Where are you going to specialize? How can you increase your focus and be the best in the world for the specific types of clients, industries, or problems that you can solve versus everybody else in staffing? Oh, one last one. Rethink how you sell. Using technology, using automation, using good old school relationship building. The ways staffing firms are selling today are different than they were a few years ago. And now as we're retraining our salespeople how to sell, you need to think differently. And my quick plug is our next lunch with Haley in May is going to be all about changing the sales process.
All right. My key takeaway, number 1, is opportunity is about to knock. I shared that story earlier from Steve and Allegis that hopefully are going to be a leading indicator that things are going to start changing. Growth is coming. And we need to ask ourselves, are we doing the things that we need to do right now to protect and gain market share? Or are we making decisions based on fear? I'm hearing a lot more companies scale back on recruitment spend. I'm hearing more cut back on marketing, cut back on sales support. Those are decisions based on fear and might not be aligning you for growth that is just on the horizon. So I'm hoping Steve and Allegis are that leading indicator. We're going to see things change pretty quickly here. Set yourself up for success. And my next takeaway is you're not necessarily behind on AI yet. When we showed and looked at those small, medium, and large size companies, we're a little bit behind maybe on the recruiting side if we're small organizations, but on the sales and client side, we're not. So take time right now to invest in infrastructure, invest in AI, invest in your processes, in your technology, in your workflow, in your training. Use AI to do that and embrace it. And again, that one staffing company mentioned that 1 out of 3 placements right now is coming through AI-based candidate engagement. Are you set up for success there and set up for speed? And Susan, take us home.
Thanks, Brad. My takeaway is the industry is simultaneously embracing AI while also going back to the basics. Second one, despite the 2023 numbers and the Q1 2024 numbers, staffing companies continue to be optimistic about their growth this year. And finally, people are reevaluating their approach to sales and training, very similar to David's takeaway. All right, Brad, David, which one of you is taking this home here?
All right, I'll flip through the final few slides. If there are questions, we're over on time, so please just reach out. You see our 888 number, you see the info app. Please feel free to ask. Happy to share ideas. Do have a couple of final things for everybody today as a thank you for attending. If you don't get our weekly newsletter, we take tips from things we learn, like the Executive Forum, because I know I think we've written 2 newsletters so far based on Executive Forum. Join us, sign up. Every Saturday morning, we send out a quick read email. It's usually probably a 3-minute read. That QR code will take you there if you don't have time to whip out your phone. It's haleymarketing.com/smart ideas. Also, we have a new ebook full of sales strategies. You heard us talking about selling differently. It's called Make an Impact. There's 33 strategies to improve how you sell, and it's at haleymarketing.com/make an impact. And last but not least, Brad mentioned the podcast. If you don't listen, you should be listening. Great advice coming from people on our team. And now we have a new show called Take the Stage, where we're inviting some of the industry's leading consultants and vendors to explain what they're seeing in the staffing industry to really give you even better, deeper insights to take your business to the next level. All right, guys. Well, from everybody at Haley Marketing, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. I hope you'll join us again on May 9th. For our talk on 10x sales acceleration. We're going to look specifically at ways to integrate marketing into your sales process to really reimagine how you sell and capture more new client revenue. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.